Welcome back to Best of Golf. Today we will learn about the rules that changed golf forever. Golf has always been called the game of honor, the sport of integrity, self-regulation, and absolute honesty. But there was a time when players carried 30 clubs in their bags, when balls traveled wildly unpredictable distances, and when the rules were so inconsistent that championship outcomes were decided by technicalities nobody understood. Then, everything changed. Some rule changes created legends, others destroyed careers, and a few sparked controversies that nearly split the sport in two. This is the story of how golf transformed from an anarchic pastime into the disciplined, billion-dollar sport we know today. The 1930s were golf's Wild West. Players experimented constantly. Bobby Jones carried 18 clubs. Some professionals carried 25. One player showed up to the U.S. Open with 32 different clubs in his bag. There was no limit. If you could carry it, you could use it. Lawson took it to the extreme. In 1935, he won both the British Amateur and U.S. Amateur championships. His caddy struggled under the weight of his bag. Little had multiple clubs for identical situations. 3 different 5-irons, 4 wedges with microscopic differences. Choosing a club took minutes. His round stretched past 5 hours. Other players noticed. They started copying his strategy. Caddies complained. Courses slowed to a crawl. A single tournament round could take 6 hours. Spectators lost interest. The game was becoming unwatchable. The USGA acted decisively. In 1938, they introduced the 14-club limit. Players could carry no more than 14 clubs during a stipulated round. Violators faced severe penalties, 2 strokes per hole, maximum of 4 strokes per round. Little was furious. He'd built his entire system around club selection. Other professionals adapted immediately. The game sped up. Strategy deepened. Players couldn't rely on equipment for every situation. They had to be creative. The 14-club rule remains one of golf's most transformative regulations. It shaped modern club design. It created the standard set we know today. It saved the sport from drowning in its own excess. June 1947. The U.S. Open at St. Louis Country Club. Lew Worsham and Sam Snead were tied after 72 holes. They headed to an 18-hole playoff. On the 18th hole, both players faced short putts, about 30 inches each. Snead prepared to putt first. Worsham suddenly stopped him. He claimed it was actually his turn. Snead disagreed. Neither player was certain. The rules official was summoned. He pulled out a tape measure. He measured both balls from the hole. Worsham's ball was 2 inches farther away. Snead had to putt first. The delay shattered Snead's concentration. He'd been ready. Now he had to reset. He stood over his putt again. His hands shook slightly. He missed. Worsham made his putt and won the championship. Snead was devastated. The tape measure became infamous. Golf had always operated on gentleman's judgment. Players agreed who was away. Officials rarely intervened. But as stakes increased, so did disputes. The USGA couldn't ban measurement. Distance from the hole determines playing order. That's fundamental. But they could clarify the process. In 1952, they updated the rules. Officials can measure when requested, but players are encouraged to reach agreement without measurement. Unnecessary delays are discouraged. The gentleman's agreement was preserved, but measurement remained available for disputed situations. The tape measure incident haunted Snead for decades. He never won the U.S. Open. That missed putt defined his career, all because of 2 inches and a piece of metal. For generations, golf balls were unpredictable. Manufacturers competed frantically. They experimented with materials, construction, aerodynamics. Some balls flew 20 yards farther than others. Players would switch balls mid-round based on wind conditions. There was no standardization. In 1920, the USGA introduced the first ball specifications. Weight and size were regulated, but distance wasn't controlled. Manufacturers kept pushing boundaries. By 1930, some balls were flying so far that classic golf courses became obsolete. The USGA and R&A disagreed on solutions. The USGA wanted a larger ball. The R&A preferred the smaller British ball. For decades, golf had two different ball standards. American professionals played one ball. British professionals played another. International competitions became complicated. In 1968, the USGA introduced distance testing. Balls could not exceed specific distances when hit by mechanical drivers. Manufacturers had to submit balls for approval. The era of super distance balls ended. The R&A resisted initially. British golf had tradition. The smaller ball had history. But by 1974, even they recognized the problem. Courses couldn't keep getting longer. Land was expensive. Classic layouts were being destroyed. In 1990, the R&A finally adopted the larger ball for all championships. Golf balls were finally unified globally. Manufacturers adapted. Distance was controlled. Course architecture was preserved. The ball standardization saved golf from becoming a game only billionaires could accommodate. April 1968. Roberto De Vicenzo stood in the scorer's tent at Augusta National. He'd just finished the final round of the Masters. He was tied with Bob Golby. A playoff seemed certain. Then came the announcement. De Vicenzo had signed an incorrect scorecard. On the 17th hole, his playing partner Tommy Aaron had marked down a 4. De Vicenzo had actually made a 3. But De Vicenzo had signed the card without checking. Under the rules, the higher score stood. There would be no playoff. Golby won the Masters. De Vicenzo was heartbroken. "What a stupid I am," he said to reporters. The golf world was stunned. Everyone had seen him make birdie. Television had recorded it. But the scorecard was final. The USGA faced enormous pressure. Critics demanded rule changes. How could a player be penalized for his marker's mistake? How could television footage be ignored? But the USGA held firm. Scorecard integrity was sacrosanct. Players are responsible for verifying their scores. They did make one adjustment. In 1968, they clarified that if a player signs for a score lower than actually taken, they are disqualified. But if they sign for a higher score, that score stands. The asymmetry was intentional. Signing for a lower score could be intentional cheating. Signing for a higher score could only be an honest mistake. De Vicenzo never won the Masters. His signature on that scorecard cost him the green jacket. But the rule remained. To this day, professional golfers check their cards obsessively. The scorer's tent is silent. Every number is verified twice. Golf courses were getting destroyed. By 1990, professionals were hitting drives 280 yards routinely. Classic courses designed for 220-yard drives were being overpowered. Par 5s were becoming drive and wedge. Par 4s were drivable. Technology was accelerating. Titanium drivers appeared. Square grooves increased spin. Multi-layer balls launched higher and rolled farther. Equipment manufacturers were winning. Golf courses were losing. Augusta National fought back. In 1999, they announced tournament lengthening. They added 300 yards to the course. Other venues followed, but adding length was expensive. Not every club could afford it. The game was splitting. Elite players played different courses than everyone else. The USGA had to act. In 2010, they introduced the groove rule. Wedges and short irons could no longer have square grooves. V-grooves reduced spin from the rough. Players couldn't just hack it out and stop it on the green. Rough became punishing again. Professionals complained. Phil Mickelson called it terrible for the game. Others adapted immediately. Equipment manufacturers redesigned entire product lines. The rule achieved its goal. Driving accuracy mattered again. Courses didn't need to keep getting longer. Then, in 2016, the USGA and R&A jointly announced they were studying distance. They confirmed what everyone knew. The ball was going too far. Courses were too long. Golf was too expensive. Something had to change. The Distance Insights Project published findings in 2020. Elite distance had increased dramatically, but recreational distance had barely changed. The gap was widening. Two different games were emerging. As of 2024, discussions continue. Potential solutions include tournament-specific balls, driver head size restrictions, or shaft length limits. The debate rages, but everyone agrees. Distance must be controlled, or golf will price itself into extinction. January 1999. Casey Martin sued the PGA Tour. Martin had a degenerative leg condition. Walking 18 holes caused him severe pain. He requested permission to use a golf cart during tournaments. The PGA Tour refused. Walking was fundamental to championship golf. Martin took them to court. The case reached the U.S. Supreme Court. The question was existential. Is walking part of golf? Or is striking the ball the only thing that matters? The PGA Tour argued that fatigue from walking was part of the challenge. Allowing carts gave Martin an unfair advantage. Martin's lawyers argued that his disability made walking more difficult for him than for able-bodied players. The cart leveled the playing field. In 2001, the Supreme Court ruled 7-2 in Martin's favor. Walking was not fundamental to golf. Carts must be allowed under the Americans with Disabilities Act. The PGA Tour complied. Martin played on tour with a cart. The ruling was controversial. Some professionals felt it compromised competitive integrity. Others supported Martin's rights. But the case forced golf to confront accessibility. Should golf be only for the physically elite, or should accommodations be made? The debate continues. The PGA Tour still doesn't allow carts in its regular events, but they must provide them when requested for disability reasons. Martin's case changed how golf thinks about inclusion. The game became slightly less exclusive. For 250 years, golfers searched for their balls in tall grass, deep rough, and thick forests. There was no time limit. Players could search for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, even half an hour. Pace of play was glacial. In 1984, the USGA introduced a 5-minute search limit. If you couldn't find your ball in 5 minutes, it was lost. Return to where you hit from, add a stroke, and play again. Professionals hated it. 5 minutes felt arbitrary. Why not 6? Why not 3? But pace of play improved immediately. Rounds that had taken 5.5 hours now finished in under 5. Then in 2019, the USGA made a shocking announcement. The search time was being reduced to 3 minutes. The golf world erupted. 3 minutes was too short. Players wouldn't find balls in thick rough. Lost ball penalties would skyrocket. The USGA was unmoved. Research showed most balls were found in the first 3 minutes anyway. The extra 2 minutes was wasted time. 3 minutes was sufficient. Professional tours reluctantly adopted the new rule. Players complained for months. But something unexpected happened. Scores didn't increase. Lost balls didn't multiply. Rounds just finished faster. The 3-minute rule is now standard. Players accept it. Spectators appreciate faster play. Television broadcasts fit better into programming windows. Golf learned that tradition sometimes just means inefficiency. Before 2019, golf rules were complicated. The rulebook was 200 pages. Officials needed extensive training. Players were constantly confused. Penalty situations required committee decisions. The game was drowning in technicality. Dustin Johnson's 2016 U.S. Open highlighted the problem. On the 5th hole, Johnson's ball moved slightly on the green. He didn't think he'd caused it. Officials weren't sure. They told him they'd review it later. Johnson played on, not knowing if he'd been penalized. After finishing, officials reviewed video. They decided Johnson had caused the ball to move. 1-stroke penalty. But they'd already told him to keep playing without knowing his score. Johnson won anyway, but the confusion was embarrassing. Golf looked amateurish. The USGA and R&A launched a complete rules overhaul. In 2019, they published a modernized rulebook. Page count was cut in half. Language was simplified. Obscure penalties were eliminated. Key changes: dropping from knee height instead of shoulder height, no penalty for accidentally moving your ball on the green, touching sand in bunkers allowed in most situations, no penalty for accidentally hitting the flagstick. Traditionalists were horrified. These rules had existed for decades. Why change now? But modern players embraced the updates. Rules were finally understandable. Penalty situations were clearer. The game became accessible. The 2019 modernization was golf's biggest rule change in history. More than any single regulation, it brought golf into the 21st century. The game could finally be understood without a law degree. From limiting clubs to standardizing balls, from enforcing scorecards to reducing search times, golf has undergone a complete transformation. Some changes protected the game's traditions, others sparked lawsuits and Supreme Court rulings, but every rule tells a story about golf evolving from a Scottish pastime into a global professional sport. The players adapted, the fans adjusted, and the game became better for it. Augusta has never been more competitive, more dramatic, or more professional.